Good morning, and welcome to Live at the Legislature, where every week we discuss the bills and issues happening down at the state capitol. This morning, we're lucky to have with us Representative Ling Johanson, who is the chair of the Labor and Public Employment Committee. He also represents District 31, which is a long list of communities here: Moanalua, Red Hill, Foster Village, Aiea, Fort Shafter, Aliamanu, and Lower Pearl Ridge. Good morning, Representative, and thank you for being here.
Hi, James. Great to be here.
Thanks. This is the last week of the legislature. We sine die on Friday. But as we all know, the economy is still struggling and a lot of people still need help. One important way the legislature has been providing or is going to provide some support is through unemployment insurance. Can you explain what the lawmakers have done to give some support to those people collecting unemployment?
Sure. Right now, unfortunately, because of the state of the economy and so much closure due to COVID-19, unemployment checks sometimes are virtually the only form of income that a lot of our workers have had. Over several hundred thousand, definitely. I think the new number is about 200, closer to 250,000 workers are now unemployed, which means instead of receiving their paycheck, they're having to rely on unemployment benefits. And so it's a really critical way of keeping our local workers and their families afloat during this time. Thankfully, the federal government also created a version of this for people who were not covered under traditional unemployment, and that's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, and that benefit is extended to people who would have been left out in the cold under our normal unemployment insurance system. So that's very helpful, but we're also cognizant that the federal government benefits don't last forever, and the state will still be on the hook. So trying to look at ways of not only keeping the fund solvent and sustainable, but also how do we deal with when the federal government benefits run out and are eclipsed or do not continue. And as a result, I think one of the most innovative things the legislature has done in this past session that we're about to adjourn is to pass the extra $230 million appropriation in our CARES Act vehicle, which would extend state unemployment, the extra plus up $100 a week until December 31st, which is critical because everybody right now, there's sort of a false effect of people getting an extra $600 a week from the federal government, which is great for now, but that runs out July 31st. And so come August 1, if there's no safety net, which this is meant to be from a state perspective, people are going to see their benefits dramatically decline.
That's going to hurt them right in the pocketbook, but you're providing at least a little bonus. They'll collect their unemployment plus an extra $100 a week. Is that correct?
Right. So about $400 extra a month. And it's nowhere near what the federal government is providing, but the state doesn't have the luxury of just printing money like the federal government. So yeah, the federal government has a little bit more latitude in that department than we do.
Are we hopeful to get more federal support? Is it possible?
Yeah, I think we're hoping for that. But that's all up to Congress.
Oh, you're fading in and out there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I said depending on the day or the political cycle, it depends on whether Congress is getting along or not. So we'll have to wait and see. Every day there's sort of new developments. So we're hopeful, but we've planned accordingly in case they.
I see. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about is as you volunteered to help with unemployment, to help them when they were really struggling, and people were so upset because they couldn't get through the system. It's an antiquated system and they were struggling. Why did you do that, and how did that come about that lawmakers and staff from the state capitol went to volunteer to help with this program?
Sure. Actually, it was a really innovative idea by the speaker and Chair Luke, the finance chair. They just decided that not enough was happening, progress was too slow, so they literally rolled up their sleeves and started demanding that the operation dramatically scale up. And that's how the convention center operation came to be. So several literally over one weekend, several hundred people, volunteers from HTA, HSTA, and UPA, the various executive branch departments, as well as the administration and the legislature stepped up to provide more than 600 volunteers on a weekly basis for fairly long shifts, all day long shifts,
Wow.
about 6, 7 at night. And one of the reasons I went is not just to answer the call of service, but I think as the labor chair, it's important to be right there in the trenches because that's a way that we can effectively provide legislative oversight and counsel. And there are instances where I think the department has benefited from this partnership with the legislature because we just see things differently. It's very easy to sort of know what your job is, know what your niche is, and know how it's always done. It can be a little bit more difficult to have an outside perspective to say, this isn't working, we need to retool, you need to think outside the box. And I think the department has tried very hard to adjust to a pandemic. I mean, no government agency, honestly, I think is that well equipped to deal with a pandemic of this nature. And there's certainly room for improvement.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're fading again there.
I know that they continue to try to improve, and so that's one of the things that I'm grateful for. Not just the opportunity to help people, but also the opportunity to help the department and help it, and in so doing, have a broader reach to help others.
It sounds like unemployment and supporting the whole system and the people has been a focus of some of what you've done this session.
Yes, yeah. I was there for quite a few months before we came back into this session. So, and I'll probably be back there once we're done with this session.
Well, another focus of yours in your community has been Senate Bill 2940, the Stadium Economic Recovery Act. I don't think a lot of people understand that very well. Could you tell us what's involved there?
Sure. So, most people know of the stadium either from athletic events or going to the swap meet or going to the 50th State Fair. But for most of its life cycle, the stadium campus, the 98 acres that comprise all of Aloha Stadium's property, are relatively vacant and fallow. One of the most innovative things I think the legislature did last session and has continued to build on this session is to create the Stadium Development District, which is looking at making the stadium into an economic generator and an actual community. So instead of just a stadium that's only used for high school graduations and competitions and UH athletic events, it's meant to make the stadium the anchor piece of a broader community that encompasses, commercial, retail, residential, recreational facilities like parks. So not only is that going to, I think, be a real economic generator in these times in terms of construction and necessary, I think it's a really terrific way to reweave the fabric of community that much of this infrastructure in my district has artificially sort of bifurcated. It's separated a lot of communities through artificially constructed barriers, and really looking forward to how that's going to connect Aiea and the end of Honolulu, the westernmost part of Honolulu, together once again, in addition to generating needed jobs and revenue for the state.
It's so exciting, the potential out there, just what could happen. And I'm really looking forward to what we end up with.
Yeah, it's not just going to be a parking lot anymore.
Well, on a somewhat sadder note, today is the memorial service for Senator Breen Harimoto, who I know was an adjacent to your district, and his memorial is 11 a.m. on Alelo Channel 49 today. What are your thoughts about the passing of the senator?
He was just a genuinely decent human being, and not just decent, but truly a nice guy. My section of Aiea overlapped his district, both when he was in the council, but also in the Senate. And, even when he disagreed with you, he was just the nicest person. And I recall an event once where another legislator was basically publicly saying he was wrong at a public meeting. And I'll never forget it. I've never seen someone shake their head no but also simultaneously be smiling, just a really genuine smile that says, no, you're totally wrong. But it was, the nicest form of disagreement I've ever seen. And sometimes, especially nowadays in politics, it can be difficult to disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that's one of Brain's strongest legacies, honestly, is actually that that he kept his humanity and his civility, and just was such a kind, nice person. Sometimes in a field that doesn't engender that kind of.
Yeah, we need more people like that, not just in politics, but in the world. He was a good man.
He was, and he will be missed.
We only have a little time left, but I wanted to ask you about the effects of the coronavirus in your community. Some people are starting to get fatigued, they say, by not wearing their masks and not following the rules. What have you seen in your residential area?
I think because most of my communities were created in the late 50s, early 60s, we have a large elderly population. And so much of my district is very careful about honoring our seniors and making sure, out of respect for them, that we abide by, the wearing of masks and social distancing. But where I've seen the fatigue a little bit more with COVID-19, we also have a lot of small businesses in our district because there's so much infrastructure, and a lot of retail is centered around that infrastructure. There's just a lot of business owners who are hurting. So, I'm hopeful that Congress will take up some additional relief there. It's something that probably the state is going to need to continue to look at, how we can help our small business owners, because that's quite honestly where I see it. And a lot of the small business owners who work in my district and own their business in my district actually also live in the district. So, it's not just off in the distance. It's looming large for all these people and me.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for watching Live at the Legislature. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
What are you doing? We have to go. I'm gonna be late for work.
It's Tuesday morning. I gotta record Live at the Legislature on Alelo. Senate and House leadership discussing what's happening at the state capitol.
So just watch it on the news tonight. Come on, let's go.
Hey, this is like getting the news before it's news. If only I could get this remote to work.
There. Can we go now?
No DVR? No problem. Watch Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. on Channel 49.
Good morning and welcome back to our second to last segment of the House Minority for this season of Live at the Legislature. Joining us this morning is Representative Val Okimoto. She represents House District 36, which covers Mililani Mauka, Mililani, and Waipio Acres. She is also rumored to be the best dressed member of the legislature.
Oh, no.
We're continuing on that theme. Good morning, Rep. Okimoto. How are you?
I was hoping to not bring that subject up again.
Well, it's the last one with you this year.
Yeah.
So yesterday, we had a marathon of a floor session. I think it was about 2 hours, and most of the length of that session came from House Bill 285, which was the, quote, police bill. There were passionate speeches on both sides, and you also had a speech on the floor. Can you tell us a little bit about the bill and what your stance on it was?
Yes, thank you. And you're right. I think I used to hear rumors of how lengthy, these floor sessions have been in the past. Since this is just my second session here, We've had longer than 2 hour sessions, but definitely this is the one for this session that's gone the longest. And I think, when I see my colleagues standing up on both sides, I appreciate that, because many times I feel that bills just go by without discussion. So, and I normally don't speak up on the floor unless I'm really passionate about something. So yeah, yesterday there was a lengthy discussion, and it was on HB 285, which relates to the public disclosure of our police department. And that was something that had been weighing heavy on me. We see a lot of what's happening in the mainland, and it's unfortunate, some of the things that have been happening. And I've had to talk to my young daughters about it, as much as I can at their level. But one thing that really strikes me as something important about Hawaii is that we have a different climate here, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah, but this HB 285, it was something that came up, and it was to disclose the identity of our law enforcement officers statewide, not just here on Honolulu, but throughout the other counties. And my concern with that was, I want to back up and just say I'm all about, and those who know me, and you know this, Kaeo, I'm all about having accountability and transparency as a part of who we are. And when we sign up to be any kind of public servant, definitely, even as I was a teacher, I think that we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. So when we talk about our law enforcement officers, I'm not saying that I support or encourage or want to enable inappropriate behavior or criminal behavior. My concern with this bill was just the part of due process, where we would have somebody who is maybe put on suspension, just part of the procedural process of their line of work. And in that time, we would have to disclose their names. And I think as a mother, what concerned me was when I heard officers sharing how this would affect their families, and that struck a chord with me.
And did you speak to any of the officers? There were some members of SHOPO on the House or on the rotunda right before floor session. Did you get a chance to speak to any of them, hear their concerns?
I did go down, and the reason I felt prompted to go down wasn't just because this bill, not just because of yesterday, but I have a lot of police officers that live in my district, a lot, and I know the sacrifices that they and their families make. And again, just like any profession, you're going to find the good eggs and the bad eggs, and they're not trying to condone or make excuses for the inappropriate behavior, but they were really concerned with what's going to happen with this bill. And I think retroactively also, if inappropriately or prematurely names are disclosed. And so I did speak with people from our community, as well as I went down and I talked to the people who had come down to support the police officers, including SHOPO, as representing them from the union.
And one of the big concerns, what you had mentioned in your speech, is just fear of the mob, I guess, right? If
Right.
An officer was prematurely reported, and perhaps public sentiment isn't necessarily for the police at that time, then a lot of people who are fathers or mothers who go to work at the end of the day and put their lives on the line may not come back, and that just as a part of their job, but also with that public sentiment in mind as well.
Yeah, that's the beauty, as well as the fear, the negative side of media, that you can get great stories out, but definitely in the public perception, someone may be prematurely or falsely accused of something, and before the jury comes back on the decision, they are publicly disclosed. And so in the public's eye, they're guilty. One of the cases I think that were brought up yesterday on the floor talked about 2 police officers, and one of them was actually found not guilty, but by then the name had been disclosed. And so those are the things that concern me with the bill. Just us as legislators putting forth bills that we know have flaws in them and passing them in its current form. That was my concern. I've spoken with. When I went down, talked to Chopra, I've always said I am for transparency, and I definitely, those who have committed wrongs, they should be disclosed. But for criminal acts, but without the due process and without them actually, being found guilty of what they did, then I feel like that's really premature of us to require that.
Definitely. I want to transition to your favorite subject. We're going to go to education.
Education.
So the DOE released their plan to return to school a few days ago. And you always come with a unique perspective. You're a parent first and foremost. You're a former educator, and you also have the legislator hat when you sit on the committee on it. So what was your initial reaction to that plan when the superintendent released it?
So I want to back up a few. I think the last time I was on Live at the Ledge with you might have been just before we did a town hall with Dr. Kishimoto, and I was able to do that virtually with her. I'm grateful for the time that she took to do that. I do have a lot of constituents in my district who are like me, parents, a lot of teacher friends, and and principals even. And so you're right. Many times I feel like I'm wearing all three hats when I'm in this position, trying to figure out what's the best way to approach this education issue. I do want to say that, because I've had parents and teachers come and contact me after, and they're frustrated. They still feel like they didn't get answers clearly given. And I can understand as a parent. I have two daughters going back to school in less than a month. And I will say that I'm a little concerned also that I don't have all the answers, and they go to two different schools. So what I realized in the town hall with Dr. Kishimoto and, after this announcement is that it's really hard for us to just get a one size fits all answer. We can't put every school into one box. And I think that's the dilemma that the DOE is in right now. So they are passing it back down to the principals. The principals have to choose from, I think 3 models that were presented to them. And a lot of the not the guideline, I guess the guidelines that the DOE is setting forth is because of that's what they're given either from, the legislature, the governor, or the mayor, or the Department of Health. And so that was my main thing. I feel like, it's, and I've talked to many people in my district, and they're concerned. Some have fears of sending their children back to school. Others have fears of, wanting to send their children back to school, but they have to go to work themselves. So I think the main thing I got out of this is I'm hoping that we can all be patient with each other, because in every industry or career right now or area that you're in, we know that this is new. COVID is new to everybody. There's no handbook. There's nothing that any of us have been prepared for. So just I encourage everybody to be patient, and I have to remind myself of that.
Sure.
Because,
Folks at home, be sure to check out that Facebook town hall on Rep. Okimoto's page. And what were some of the questions that you had and that you've heard from some of your teacher friends?
Well, a lot of them have concerns. I want to say, and this again speaks to the hearts of teachers, that as much as many of them, or I shouldn't say many, as much as some of them have concerns about the health, they know that they need to be back in the classrooms with the keiki. They want to be face to face, and they realize that yes, virtual learning is going to be a part of this blended curriculum now, but their hearts are really in helping our kids, because their hearts are in trying to get them educated. But, as parents, it is concerning when we hear the discrepancy between 3 feet and 6 feet. What's the right way? How are we going to keep our kids safe in the classroom? How are we going to keep our teachers safe at the same time? Because, I was a teacher, and I will say that there were years where I taught when I was sick. You just go in, because it's easier to just go in and teach your class than it is to try and get a substitute. There's you have to entrust your care with subs, and there's a sub shortage as well. So that's something that's at the top of the list. How are we going to make sure that the keiki are going to be safe? How are we going to make sure the teachers are safe? And for somebody like me who is an educator, and I have parents who feel the same way, they want to make sure that the curriculum is rigorous enough and we have high quality education. So there's a lot of unknowns. I have reached out to the principals in my district. I think I have 4 out of the 5 I reached out to and spoken, especially to the middle school, because that's the one that's in multi-track, where the students are all coming back in at the same time now, which is something, not done before. So I know they're trying their hardest to make sure that we can meet the requirements. But that's, at the top of the list of my friends and constituents in the district.
These are certainly challenging and unprecedented times.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Transitioning next, we're expecting about a $2.3 billion shortfall within the next couple of years with the lack of tourism and just the way the economy's been. Being part of the minority, you're a fiscal conservative. What are some of the recommendations that you have for just families who are expecting to kind of weather through this crisis?
Thank you for asking. And though, again, in this short tenure that I've been in the office so far, I'm pretty consistent in that whenever a bill comes to me, I want to know what's the appropriations, where are we getting the money from, how are we going to pay for this? Because like Johanson mentioned before, we can't just print money. It doesn't grow on trees. And so I am concerned. We do have a large deficit, and I realize that we as a legislature, we needed to pass these bills to get the economy started. I would just encourage families first. I've always been fiscally conservative, to just be responsible. a lot of that is taking care of our health, because if we're not healthy, then we can't take care of our families, or we can't be productive in our careers or our jobs. So that's one area. But we did. I wanted to kind of segue into something that a little controversial bill that came through. I believe it was last week. Was SB 785, and it was for pay raises that were going to be allowed to the government employees. And I am not against people being, given their fair due. And I agree that this was given beforehand. But at this time, where our economic status is very critical, and we are really on the verge of disaster, really, I would just encourage everybody to understand that we have to make tough decisions like no other, where we can't just promise everything like we have before. And so I encourage everybody to just be fiscally responsible. Don't spend money where you shouldn't, and be aware of what's happening. And if you can in any way support local businesses, that's always been a passion of mine also, to support our local businesses. That's important.
And last, we've got about 15 seconds left. How's your district been? What's the pulse? What have you been hearing from your constituents?
I love my district. I think they've reached out to me a lot more now that we've been in this situation, but they're doing well. We are concerned about the economic, the health, and the education of our state and our communities. But I just want to encourage everybody, like I've always done, keep the Aloha spirit, and we will get through this together.
Absolutely. Representative Okimoto, thanks again for joining us. Hopefully this isn't the last time we'll see you, but we will, to the viewers at home, we will see you next week. Aloha.
We will. Thanks, everybody.